last year I wouldn't come to NAMM this year, but here I am. But I've been asked to sort of deconstruct one of the Empath recording sessions, and so I took the liberty at home of sort of bouncing all the tracks down and sort of give you an idea of what the process is. Hi Sam, how's it going, buddy? Sam played on Empath too, right? So, but he didn't play on this one, so I'm sorry. But so basically, I'll just go through this section at a time. So I basically color code all these things, and by the time I get to the end of a mix, I've got sort of a sub-mix of all these things going. So where are we here? So, oh, it's at a different sample rate. Okay, so how do I change that? Does anybody know? Do you know how to change sample rate in Pro Tools?
Playback engine.
Hello.
Playback engine.
It's in a different sample rate. You know how to change the sample?
Playback engine.
He's changing the sample rate. It's going to be super sweet. 41, no. 48. Sick dick. Thanks, buddy. Check this out. Now we are in tune, I bet. Let's see. Right. So.
There it is.
All right. So where should we start? So Empath required 3 drummers and an orchestra and a ton of different players and a women's choir and a lot of things. And the mix, as one would imagine from something like that, became a nightmare. And a second, let me find a complicated bit. All right, so where do we start? I'll play a bit and then I'll start talking about it. That's the best way. Okay, so. So that's a good, let's see, this section maybe? Alright, so let's start with, what's this, orchestra? So everything I do is a sub-mix, even when it came down to the drums. So because we had 3 drummers, I hate equalizing and compressing drums. Specifically when there's people in my world who are so much better at it than I. So I asked them to do sub-mixes for me. And so all my mixes, by the time it gets to the end, it's basically a sub-mix that I can refine by adding additional things. So you'll see my basic sub-mix here for the drums were everything in one place. With the samples and everything, right? And it's a good mix. But then I added to that with a different sound so we didn't run into phase, like another kick, and then another snare, and another snare. And so by the end, most of the time when I'm mixing drums, and that's the green stuff here, if I'm finding that I want to accentuate a part, it's usually just kicks, snare, or toms. So if I run those in parallel, I can typically just give a bit of a goose, and specifically if either they're phase aligned or they're a different sound. And so that keeps a drum simple. I hate equalizing and compressing drums, so I ask other people to do it. Bass, so I put them all, anything that's in that frequency I include in the same place, and by the time I get to the end, I've done all my high and low pass filters and all this, and there's 2 or 3 bass players on this record as well, so, right, just your basic. And then I got my synths, bass synths, doing all this sort of wacky shit here. Let's see now. All right, so. So I keep all those sort of in one place. And then for guitars, what did I do for guitars? So I was a combination of digital and amplifiers. Ended up using the Axe-Fx and the Kemper, and I think I ended up using a real amp too. Let's see what we got for guitars. So there's a heavy sound, and then I fade in this sort of dirt sound, which I really like. In fact, the main sound for this song, Evermore, is this weird sort of half-distorted thing, which I think with the bass carries a lot of energy. as much as I have been doing heavy music, the thing that I typically like about electronic music is that you can get more space in a mix when you don't have your mix inundated with heavily distorted guitars and cymbals. So I tried on this one using clean guitars and then making the distortion come from a synth, because it seems like the frequencies on the synth seem to be a lot more like harmonically friendly to the speakers. So a good example of that, let me see where I can find it, is like this section between the bass synth and the guitar. I tried to double up those parts so it functions like So a lot of Empath had that as its foundation. I've just finished, I've spent 6 months mixing the record in surround, and it sounds so good. Oh my God, it sounds so good. No one's gonna be able to listen to it because no one's really got the system for it, but I really wanted to do it, and I apparently really wanted to spend a lot of money on it too, so I did that. So if you have a system, check it out. But that was great because typically I get sort of saddled with this whole sort of wall of sound thing, but that's only a product of how I tend to view music is I try to orchestrate things. So even as I'm working with drummers or bass players or guitar players, a lot of times they're like, well, we're going to take a liberty with this particular part. And I'm like, please don't, because everything is reliant on everything else, so it doesn't become like just a shit show in the speakers. However, doing it in 5.1 gave me 3 other speakers, and it is really nice because you don't have to compress it in the same way. I don't tend to compress the mix too much or limit it. Okay, what else we got next? So all these are guitars, so we've got acoustic guitars here. Oh no, that's an arpeggio guitar. So that section, for example, and I use Ableton. What I'll do is I'll take a section, I'll export it, put in the tempo into Ableton, and then I'll loop it and just jam over it. So this little section here, I'll show you how, and I love it just individually. Like this is what it started with, this guitar part. But then I did this with, and then we've got this Ableton track. And at the end, when it all sort of climaxes, we get like, let's see. Right, keep going. And then Nathan, the poor bass player, had to learn that part, which, oh, so he plays it in the first one now. Let's see. So trying to get space in that, on this record in particular, I tried to view every riff as like a different song, in a sense. So in the beginning, we've got the main riff, it's just like D and C. So if you listen to the main band, and a lot of what I try and do is ear candy as well, right? So if you listen to the main band of what the actual rock riff is doing in this beginning, it's just this.